We've been talking about life-changing stories around body image, and in the last episode, if you missed it, you want to go check that out with Josh and Julia. Just good stuff. And today's episode, as we wrap up this conversation, is continuing this really rich conversation. I know it's going to bless you as much as it blessed me, but so we're picking up with part 2, and just what does recovery look like, and what are some things we learned on this road to recovery as we face our body image and ultimately learn how to walk in the biblical view of how God sees us, the biblical view of body. Today, we're continuing the conversation with Josh and Julia. Welcome to Hope and Recovery, a Fellowship Celebrate Recovery podcast that shares hope and healing for our mental, spiritual, emotional, and relational journey through life-changing stories and recovery topics, all centered around the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5 and the Celebrate Recovery principles, where Jesus equips us to face our hurts, our hang-ups, those lies that we may be believing about ourselves, God, and others, and even our circumstances, so that we can ultimately tackle those habits, or sometimes we call them defenses or protections, that we develop along the way as we deal with the pain, maybe the trauma in our life, that always, and more often than not, I should say, cause havoc on our relationships with others and create separation between us and God that ultimately can be a hopeless place. But I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I struggle with drugs and alcohol and perfectionism. My name is Rodney. I'm the pastor and ministry leader of Fellowship Rogers Celebrate Recovery. And so good to be back here with you. Hopefully you've been enjoying these episodes around body image and specifically the last episode around life change. And I heard some really good conversations with Josh and Julia, who were courageous to come on and share their story here locally with us, and so much so that I had to split it into 2 episodes. And so I'm excited for you to hear the second part of this conversation, and what does freedom and hope look like? What's a recovery process look like? And so listen in as we continue the conversation with our friends Josh and Julia. And this can kind of play into this question, but I think it's a great question. If I miss a workout, what happens to my mental health?
Yeah.
Right? Do I spin out? Do I go into a deep depression? And that's good to be curious about that. It's like, okay, don't shame that, but what is that? Why am I having this kind of a visceral response to this? Have I gotten into the unhealthy? Because anything that's so rigid, and this kind of bleeds over into perfectionism a little bit, that we're not designed to be perfect, right? If we're so rigid that there's no room for any error, then that's where anxiety is going to come in. That's where anger is going to come in. That's where fear is going to come in. So all that stuff, and then we end up projecting that rigidity on other people and that perfectionist mindset. But how is that affected as you think about your stories and your journey? How has it affected your mental health when you're in an unhealthy place with body image?
Yeah, I think of, let me think of the healthy places. When I'm in that healthy place with working out and those kinds of things, Julie, I think you were kind of hitting at this of just, I don't know, one of the things you said reminded me of when I've seen my friends go on a good health journey. I think that outward focus kind of helpful. When I see them find a workout routine or a workout class that they really enjoy, and you just see them going for it, and yeah, you see that their body's changing and adapting to that exercise specifically, but they're also like, they enjoy it. It's hard, but they're like, they found whether it's like a specific sport or activity or it's a class, they're really enjoying that. When I see those people, it's become built into the rhythm of their life, and they're making small sacrifices for it, but it's not the important thing. So they've found something that's cohesive with their life. And I think for me, when I've been at my best is when I've found those things that I enjoy. For me, there's sports I enjoy playing. I made a shift from one workout to a different one because I realized that I just like playing pickup basketball, and having space for that in my life was something that was an active thing that I could do. And then I think of, recently Rhythms of Life have had me and my wife traveling a little bit, and how that's been making me feel. And on one hand, there were some pieces of that was like, okay, there's realistic expectations. It's a passing season, those kinds of things. But then when it comes to looking in the mirror and the passing comments about my body, those kinds of things that I'm making and those kinds of things, but I'm not necessarily addressing them. I'm not making any kinds of routine changes or any kinds of like fair assessments or pausing to listen to what I'm saying about myself. And I'm just going about it. And so I feel like more than anything, it leads to avoidance of this thing that I'm struggling with. I'm struggling with body image in that moment. I'm struggling with self-loathing, but I'm not addressing it. And so I think that creates some weight, some mental weight, some energy loss, those kinds of things that then shows itself in other places. And so I think it's this kind of mental weight that I wind up carrying in addition to maybe either more or less weight than I was carrying physically before.
That's good.
Yeah, that is good. I think for me, I remember hitting this point in my body image journey where I realized in a very practical, experiential way that I can't separate my mental health from my physical health.
No.
And it was a hard lesson to learn because in my kind of extreme dieting, it affects, everything. Like if I'm not fueling my body in an effective way, I can't remember things well. My emotions and my hormones get off whack and I'm not able to function at my best. And I remember specifically, this is like a really, just like in the midst of my dysfunction, like I got home one day, it was just me and the kids. Andy, my husband, wasn't home yet. And both of the kids just started having a meltdown because they wanted to go to the park. And I'm really sad for myself that I was in such a dysfunctional place that like I was extreme dieting. And so like I hadn't eaten enough and I couldn't down-regulate my own emotions to be able to regulate them. And I just kept spinning out and like, they were just so upset and I was so upset. And I remember just being like trying all these different things best I could to like, stop crying or guys were trying. And like, I couldn't just like empathize with them. And I was getting really spun up. And I remember just kind of like kicking back the wall of my room, just so frustrated and so angry. And like, we all have those moments as parents where aren't our best, but it was just like, I knew that it was because I could feel like I needed fuel, like I needed that to be able to downregulate. And my husband knows it too. Like he doesn't I don't diet anymore, but he was always so frustrated. There's times where I was like dieting because it would affect my mood and I couldn't. And it was like, it is night and day if I was dieting and then being like, okay, I need to fuel my body again. And then it would just be, and then I would think back and be like, why did that spin me out? And that was just like a very visceral lesson of how I truly can't, like those things are so connected. I can't separate them. And that happened so many times on a lesser scale. That was just kind of the biggest point. And I think it hit me so hard because I love my kids so much. And so it was just, I was so devastated that like, I couldn't regulate them because I wasn't regulated, and it was a good wake up call.
Yeah, that's well said. So that you're dysregulated in that space, and I don't have the tolerance, I don't have the stamina to be able to get myself in that regulated space. Is another way to say that. Yeah. So I think that's good because and I talked about this in the abuse workshop I did recently that we kind of have these protections that we develop. So it's good to get into our story to understand the good reasons why I do what I do, right, in the lens. But then kind of get into that space of understanding what's the cost to me, right? What's the good reasons, but what's the cost for me, and really feeling that. And then what's the cost for the others in my life? So what you just described there, and we kind of understand, you've led us into your story, like there's good reasons why I'm kind of falling into this, to that little girl that's trying on the dress. And then ultimately the cost to you is I can't be the mom that I want to be, the wife that I need to be. I'm disconnected. And then the cost to others is my husband and my kids don't get the best version of me. Not the perfect version, but the best. So it's just interesting to think about the cost of being in that narrative, right? In that space, that unhealthy, dysfunctional view of the body image that I've taken on. So
yeah. I think there's this kind of idea that if my body's a separate thing that doesn't affect my spiritual life, doesn't affect my relational life. And we just sometimes just have this view of my body that it's just the thing that carries the bag of water that carries my soul and my spirit and my emotions and my sense of humor in those things places. But it's a important thing that allows those things to regulate and function in really healthy ways. I just think all the times I skipped a meal or the times that I was doing something unhealthy and it led to just shortness with people or an inability and then I think of the opposite where I just engorged myself or something and then was incredibly unproductive later on in that day. And I think that sometimes we just disregard what our body's trying to tell us and what we're feeling. And
we're so mean to our body.
Mean.
We don't treat it well and then we expect it to perform. And it's devastating.
When it goes back to that motive, I mean, it just like the emotional, mental, physical can't be disconnected. The spiritual.
Yes.
Right. The spiritual component is, I mean, even skipping a meal, if the motive is, I want to connect with you, Lord, in the fasting, right? That's a very beautiful practice, a discipline. But if my motive is about me, then it's not the right healthy space. But if the motive is, Lord, I want to hear you, I'm going to go in this season spiritually. This is a biblical view of what I'm about to do versus I need to skip a meal because I hate the way I look.
Yeah.
And now we're spinning out.
I think of the image that always comes to mind is C.S. Lewis described us as amphibians. So just like a frog lives on water and lives on land, human beings are both spiritual and physical beings. And those aren't separate from one another. Those are both important. And so to have a deep spiritual life, we have to grow as people, understanding our physical lives. And those are 100% a part of it. It's the same reason that our bodies are the things we use to put our hands together to pray, to get on our knees, raise our hands in worship. Those we are embodied people, and those bodies are good things. And I think that truth, and it's easy to generalize. And I think one of the things that Celebrate Recovery is so helpful with is in that step study, I'd immediately be told, no, I and me statements. My body's good. My body's a gift from God. And that's a really hard thing for me to believe.
It feels like the lie. Yeah. I remember feeling that a lot. And first stepping into working through my body image stuff is for me just to tell myself, you're beautiful. I was like, okay, well, it's everyone's saying I'm not, everyone meaning the culture's quote unquote standards. It feels like the lie to just be oh, I'm beautiful. People think I'm beautiful. And it's it doesn't feel like the truth.
So you mentioned Celebrate Recovery, and I want to make sure I create some space for that. What did the recovery look like? And Julia, you kind of hit on some of those things, the aha moments that came to the surface to learn the good reasons why I have this mindset. But what's some of the things that if someone is listening, thinking about jumping, I struggle with body image and some of these things are resonating with my heart. What did Celebrate Recovery teach you? Jesus Christ working through Celebrate Recovery, obviously, but what's some of the things that you learned through that process about you? Even that I am me statement of just that saying that out loud for the first time, right? I or my body is powerful in itself. But what did you learn through the process, Josh?
Yeah, I don't think I would have ever pinned specifically those that I struggled with body image issues until I was a part of Celebrate Recovery. And that came out of just a better understanding of how codependency played out in my life and my desire to be loved by other people and to earn their affection, and realizing that I was trying to do that through my appearance. And I think this is something most people do to varying degrees, but this is something I was really struggling with, and specifically some self-hatred and that kind of thing in that space. And so even wanting affirmation and recognizing, my wife's a person that's really good at healthily affirming my body and with her words and those kinds of things. It's really helpful for me. Celebrate Recovery was really helpful on one case because every time I've shared this with somebody on a non-Celebrate Recovery space, they have then gone on to say, well, your body's great. And that's the last thing I'm looking for in that moment, actually. So very practically, one, I was able to say in a step study safely out loud. And the most I got was just a kind nod from someone and just them listening to me express that and process and connect it. Wow. The other thing was realizing what that was connected to in myself and what lies were below the surface of that. There's the emotional thing that I'm dealing with when I'm talking about my body and how I view my body. And that is connected to lies that I believe about God, myself, and the world around me and the people around me. And I think the other thing that's been I think it's a helpful game in lots of different parts of life, but just being able to call out lies as we see them from culture. One of those might be being able to watch the Olympics and say, wow, that's a really good body that God made. And there's a completely different one that God made, and being able to acknowledge those things. And then the lies when we see the commercial or we see the action movie and we're like, wow, that person, had to, work out really religiously and have this crazy diet. And they had to fast for 3 days before this scene so they could look really good on camera versus what I used to believe, which was just, oh man, my body's not Thor's, my body's not Captain America's, and so my body's bad. And I think that for me, realizing how that was connected and how often I was being fed messages or receiving messages and not challenging those and just hitting pause and recognizing what those things were. That's where Celebrate Recovery has been incredibly helpful, where step study has been really incredibly helpful, and why I'd invite anyone that's processing through that to bring that into a step study. Yeah.
Before we go to Julie, Josh, I want one more quick thing with you, man, because I think this is so important. And you and I have talked about this, just kind of the culturally, what are men supposed to look like in general, right? We're talking about Thor, but just in general, there's that level Thor, LeBron James kind of thing. But then there's just the everyday. I wonder if you could just speak a couple minutes on that, just the narratives of, I'm thinking of a guy that, just a skinny dude that loves to work on computers, right? And he's, not a whole lot of muscle definition, but how the culture can kind of almost shame, that you're not a real man because you don't look like this. And I'm not talking about Thor, but just in general, I wonder if you could speak to that.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is that those messages aren't coming from the Lord. Where those messages come from, that's not the voice of the Holy Spirit. That's not the voice of kindness. That's not Jesus' voice at all. And I also think of the small person. I think of someone, the wheelchair bound person, the sick person, as being the people that Jesus drew near toward all of the time. And so whatever your body looks like, those voices are voices of shame is the first thing. And just speaking of the culture in general, it's of a piece with views of masculinity in our culture. And that view is that it's supposed to be that stoic, that John Wayne, that cowboy, the person that doesn't need help, the person that can take a bunch of bullets and keep going.
Right.
And then there's all the whether it's, a lot of times for men growing up in sports or whatever it might have been, that, and then your interests were varied. It was arts or it was books or it was computers, those kinds of things. And suddenly you don't feel manly and you get into the conversation at your church or your water cooler and people are talking sports and you don't even know how to engage in that. So it's just this big masculine picture, and it's just not the voice in Scripture. We have a Savior who was gentle and lowly, even as he carried a cross and could not carry the cross to the finish. So all that to say is I just think there's this picture of masculinity that's not Christ-like. And it's really redeeming to find that Jesus isn't looking for me to be like physically strong enough. He's actually looking for the opposite.
I love that. Yeah. And, and that struggle, the water cooler conversation, not only do I not look the part, I can't even talk the part, right? So just it's another layer of shame. I know I put you on the spot there, but I know we've talked about that before, but I think it does connect with the body image and how I view myself, and can I just embrace who I am. But Julia, thoughts for you? What's that process look like for you?
Yeah, I think for me, I remember coming to a place where I had to kind of reframe beauty and what quote unquote beauty is. And I remember having this realization where, I'm a female attracted to men, and being like, oh, all different types of body types. It just goes well with what you're saying, are beautiful, and there's like, like you were saying, like the Thor or like the skinny guy or the, lean or what are they? There was like the dad bod for a while or whatever. And like, I remember being
wait,
like,
I missed that one.
He's like, wait, but
I would have done well with that one. So. Sorry.
Well, no, it's good because it's like, yeah, it's all beautiful. It's all different types of bodies that are all attractive in different ways and all express beauty. And I remember like reversing that to myself and being like, oh, like I have thought mostly from culture that women have one body type. I feel like that is what is perpetuated, is like we have to look this way, and there's no other standard of beauty, and it hit me like, no, there is. Like, it truly is beautiful to. I remember one day being so proud of myself because Andy and I were hiking, and there was these like 3 women that all had completely different body types, and I remember truly believing in my heart, they're all beautiful. And like that, I was so critical of other women. I was so critical of myself. I mean, like, well, oh wow, they could lose weight or get that or whatever. And I remember being like, no, like that's not what it is. Like,
yeah,
everyone's beautiful in their own way. And then I think that another thing too was just that realizing like my whole identity at the same time can't be found in the way that I look. Like, that's not God's design for us. Like, our bodies, like we said, are used for so many different things. And like, say I did have my quote unquote perfect body type that I wanted, then what? What if I lost that? Is my whole identity now gone? Is that all that I had to offer to the world? And so I think realizing that, at the same time that we want to reframe what beauty is, physical beauty, and everything is beautiful, and we can find beauty in everything. At the same time, that shouldn't be our whole identity, and that shouldn't be my whole identity, because that's not where who I am lies. And then I think too, just a practical thing was learning kind of healthy habits and what healthy habits are, so that I can pinpoint. It's like a measuring stick to be like, oh, so what I'm doing is an unhealthy habit of being like, okay, if I'm not eating when I'm hungry, that's not a good sign. Like, I need to fuel my body. It's telling me something. It's signaling you're hungry. You need fuel to keep up what you're doing, like your work day. Or if I'm full and I keep eating, it's like, okay, what's going on? Are you a little emotional today? Is there some stress going on? And it's all a signal. And so I think realizing, oh, these are some truly healthy standards for actual health, not the quote unquote fitness industry health, but actual health, was helpful, so that it could reveal to me if I'm slipping into some unhealthy habits.
Yeah.
Good.
And I think it's good. One of the components we talked about on the last podcast is support network, right? I think it's a good thing if you know what your action tendencies are when you're getting out of bounds.
Yeah.
Let some people into that.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, this is what I do that could look different from another person, but when I start getting out of bounds and in an unhealthy space, these are my action tendencies. And then take a step further. I give you permission to speak into my life if you see those indications come out, because I don't want to go into that space. So somebody's listening that's struggling, and kind of wrapping up our time here. What would you say? Maybe some of the things, somebody is connecting with your story and they're thinking, okay, I think that's me. I think, I do that. These are some of my struggles. The last podcast they've been listening to, kind of thing, and these indications, these characteristics. You have their ear right now, and maybe they're kind of in that hopeless place, and they bought into some narratives. I want to hear from both of you, just some words of encouragement that you would. You're on the phone with them right now. They can hear your voice, and you're speaking directly to them. What would you say to them to encourage them to jump into this journey to face their body image struggles?
Yeah. I think of a piece with lots of things I struggle with. It is really important to be very kind to yourself. It's important for me to be kind to myself and to be ruthlessly unkind to the lies that you believe about yourself, and to not hesitate to call those out, to just when you're saying those things about yourself, to pause and listen to what you're saying and to challenge those things. And the best place to challenge those things is in community, going to scripture, going to those things. And I think about the gospel of the body is not that your body's bad and you need to fix it, but that is the gospel we believe about all things, that here's my addiction, it's bad, I need to fix it on my own. But if you've been in Celebrate Recovery for any length of time, that probably wasn't working for you. The gospel is your body was made good, and that you've encountered the results of sin and brokenness in our world, just like every person has, but that there is hope and there is redemption in Christ, and that goes toward our physical lives, our emotional lives, our spiritual lives, all of those things, and that someday he'll make those things new. But since your body's going to last forever, and since God is going to redeem that work, learn how to find joy and growth in your body and take those healthy steps forward and truthfully deal very unkindly with those lies. And then the next step from there is, well, what is like a healthy step forward? And then I would invite community into that. I would talk to my sponsor, talk to whoever's discipling me, talk to a mentor or a friend, and just start that conversation. And that's then good. I would be really just stay curious with what things you're saying about yourself.
I love that. Good stuff.
Yeah. Mine, I feel like the biggest thing that helped me is fairly simple, but took a lot of courage to actually put into practice, which was, kind of like learning those healthy habits and learning what's unhealthy and practicing those as kind of like almost a first step of being like, okay, like I said, or like one of my most helpful things was to eat when I'm hungry and to stop eating when I'm full, and just learning to do that and actually listening to what my body is telling me. The hardest part with that, I did feel a bit like I was stepping off of the edge of a building, because I felt a bit like I was free falling. And that was just because there were still rooted in there all of these lies and these beliefs. Like what I was doing was like having to give up trying to reach these unrealistic standards. Like I had to be like, okay, I know what's good to do and what's bad to do, but to actually step out and give up trying to extreme diet and trying to be a lighter weight or thinner or whatever. That's what I was practically doing, was like giving up that by fueling my body when it needed to. And of course there's like, I feel like we know what things are healthy-ish and unhealthy-ish, but even not obsessing about the things that are, like it's okay to have treats every now and then, and just listening to my body. But I think even practically with that, I've learned to like what things don't sit well with my body. If I do have a ton of sugar, I feel bad after. And so the reason I'm not eating it is not because of a physical thing. It's because I don't feel good. Or the things that make me feel good and give me a ton of energy are like protein and carbs. Like I love eating that, and so it becomes more about the fuel and about listening to my body and less about aesthetics. And so for me, that was just super helpful.
That's good. Well, and we said it prior, but focus on health, not appearance. And it's easy to kind of make this a food issue. I mean, you kind of got into the eating, the food side, but it's so much more than just food issues, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so many dynamics. And so there is some crossover there, but just the way I see myself and look at myself is so important. But I think I just want to say this too, and I said this prior, if you are struggling with a significant body image, just always good to hear this, that it's okay to seek professional help. In conjunction with what you're doing in Celebrate Recovery, go see a therapist, and maybe there's some things that maybe you've gotten way out of bounds that you need to talk through. Don't be ashamed of that. There's no shame in asking for extra help, and if you need some professional help, invite community into that. Self-compassion, doing the things that we need to do, and then trust the process. I think is important. That you didn't get here overnight, and it's not going to be fixed overnight, but we can grow along the way. So Guys, thanks so much. Good stuff. Lots of loaded stuff in this. I know it's going to bless our listeners, so I appreciate you taking time to share your hearts and your wisdom in this topic.
Yeah,
Thanks, Rodney.
us.
Such good stuff. And I hope it blessed your heart as much as it did mine. And listen, if the Holy Spirit is kind of tapping you on the shoulder and revealing some things about yourself that this might be an area of struggle, please, shame off you that this isn't yours to carry. It's just be honest about that. Let's bring it to the table and let's begin the process of healing and growth and life change the way Christ intended, even in this area of body image. And so if you're struggling and some things have hit your heart and you're feeling that tap on the shoulder to do something about it, we'd love to have you at Fellowship Fayetteville, Fellowship Rogers, every Friday night. Same schedule, different people, but same incredible experience. Go to fellowshipcr.org for more information. We hope to see you join us this Friday night. Hey, thanks so much for being with me today. I pray that you'll join me next time. Until then, God bless you guys.